Good morning and afternoon, everyone, wherever you are coming in from around the world. My name is Brendan Prasner, Product Marketing Manager here at Deco Network, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our Understanding Embroidery Pricing webinar. Well, we've got a lot of information to get through, so without any delay, I'd like to introduce Mr. Eric Campbell, the Embroidery Guru and Relationship Manager here at Deco Network. G'day, Eric.
Good day, Brendan. I'm very happy to have Brendan along. Not only is Brendan the product manager over here at Deco Network, but what you may not know if you haven't heard from him before is he also has experience in the embroidery market and came in as I did as a digitizer. So Brendan, I'm welcoming him to come keep me on my toes. He's going to jump in. We're going to keep it conversational, and he'll ask some questions and fill some things out as we go along too. So Brendan and I will both be talking a bit, but mostly I'll be presenting to you some points, mostly from the ebook that we produced about understanding embroidery pricing, but with a little bit more conversational tone and with some extra stories and fun stuff as we go along the way.
Yeah.
So as you can see, we're going to start with understanding embroidery pricing. This is the first of our 10 Days of Embroidery webinar series, and I can't wait to get you guys started.
All right, well, good luck, Eric, and hope everyone enjoys the event.
Thank you, Brendan. So in this session, we're going to cover the following: knowing your shop, doing the math, the minimum to maintain, preparing for profit, dealing with digitizing, which is something we're just going to cover a little bit on, additional fees, and price versus value. So you don't need to know much about that yet. Just to help you kind of see the flow of where we're going to talk about the initial calculations up front. We're going to talk a little bit about pricing, and I'll introduce you into the session just discussing what pricing is. A lot of this is going to be about not only the terminology around pricing, but some of the theory behind how pricing works and what kinds of pricing models there are out there and why people use them, what's good about them and what's not. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you justify fees, and at the very end and throughout, I'm going to pepper this with a little bit of talk about value versus price, because a lot of us really think about price as a function of cost, but there is something more to it about value that will allow us to charge more and to get more out of the effort we put into our work. So before we begin any more talk about calculations, about pricing, the first thing I have to tell you is your work is valuable. Your labor is valuable. Sometimes people come into this and see themselves as commodities, and they don't think about their labor. They don't think about what they do as being inherently valuable. They only think about the product. But your work, your time, your creative thought, your input is valuable. And second thing, sometimes, especially people coming into this from a creative drive, say you love embroidery, you love design, you love decorating. Some people come into this from the craft market, and they don't think about profit. They just want to make money back so they can keep doing the thing they love. And I mean, that's great. I love embroidery very much too, and I've been accused of taking jobs where maybe they aren't the most profitable because they were fun or they were technically hard to do. Sometimes that stuff's fun and great and can fuel your creative side of the business. However, you need profit to grow and thrive. So talking about profit, talking about what you bill, talking about money, get over that now. If you're not talking about business, if you aren't doing business, you won't be in business later down the road. However, I do want to leave you with this quote in mind. So in the back of your head, keep this on the back burner as we talk about pricing and all the technical sides of it, that what you really are going to want to do ultimately for your shop is to find your unique value, dare to care for the customer's experience, and be audacious enough to charge what you deserve. And the thing is, it's really not audacious. The reason I say audacious there is because some people feel like it's audacious. They feel like, I can't believe that I have to go and just tell people I'm worth this much and I'm not going to take that lower amount. But the truth is, you deserve a certain amount of money for the work that you do. You deserve to make profit. You deserve to cover your costs. And you shouldn't have to take less than that to stay in business. You just have to find your value, find your market, and work from there and be able to sell that value into that market. So really keep that in your back of your mind. We're going to have that unique value. We're going to talk about more than just costs and more than just pricing. So we have a little delay on the slides here. All right, so knowing your shop. The first thing we have to start with is knowing your shop. Every shop is different. If someone talks to you about pricing and the first thing they say is they toss out a number, say they just go, okay, 99 cents per 1,000 stitches. They really aren't thinking about your shop. That might be a good baseline. It might be something that's normal to the industry, but it doesn't take into account the unique position that your shop is in. Your total costs may be different than the costs of their shop. let's say that, like me, I'm in New Mexico. Right now I'm sitting in an office in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My office costs maybe $150 a month, which some of you are going to hear that and be astounded that I have a small office in a shared office space for $150 a month. If you were in another state, in another city even, you could not expect that incredibly low property cost. My costs are not going to be the same as costs in New York or in California or in Oregon or anywhere or across the world. So if you don't take your costs, your locality, like I said, over on the right-hand side, you see local or in your niche market, you don't take your locality into account, you don't really know your costs. Somebody might not take your niche market into account. You may have a market that's willing to pay more for your products based on the kind of market they are. If you're selling into, say, a hobby market is your niche, and that hobby is a very expensive hobby, these people might be very used to spending a great deal on the products that they use for their hobby or for their team or for their company, and they may be willing to pay more than another niche. Also, your equipment. If you're somebody who has a single head machine, the amount of production you can do on a single head machine isn't the same as a 12 head, isn't the same as two single head machines. If somebody doesn't ask you about your equipment, then the money that they tell you to charge won't take into account your actual throughput. Also, your unique value. And that's why I talked about unique value earlier. You may find that there's something you do, and you should find something that you do, that sets you apart from your competitors. Now, whether that's something that has to do with the product you're producing, whether it has to do with the service or the experience that you give, or something about your creativity or your execution or your quality of your decoration, there's a unique value that you can provide that another shop can't. So all of these come together to make up your shop's unique position. So you have to know your shop before you can price. If you don't know anything about your shop, if you don't have anything measured or recorded, if you haven't thought about these things, the likelihood that someone else giving you a random price off the top of your head is going to work for your business is low. Or at the very least, it's not taking into account all it could be to give you the best pricing for your shop.
So I guess, Eric, when you are looking at doing competitive pricing and you are looking at your local region, it would make sense
Sure.
that you look for your local competitors and compare your prices to them, and not, if you're in California, you don't look up what embroiderers do in New York to compare whether you're being locally competitive. Would that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And as we go through these calculations, I'm going to make that point, certainly. You do want to know what your competitors charge. There's no saying that you aren't going to do that. One thing I will say is it's not the best way to get into the business to do a survey of your competitors in your local region and just price below them.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that is a race to the bottom and you can't win. And the thing you're going to find out, especially if you start out, if you're a small shop, you're a single entrepreneur, which a lot of folks are when they first start out, you've got a single head, you're working by yourself, you're not going to be able to compete with the throughput of a shop like, say, the shop that I left, where you're running 64 heads and you're running full tilt, you have multiple operators, sometimes you're running 2 shifts when you're busy. The amount of throughput I can put through with the same, with the amount of the equipment that I have and for the cost that I have in overhead just isn't the same as what you can do as a single head shop. Yeah. So trying to undercut that pricing will cause your business to fail.
Yeah, a common mistake of the word competitive pricing.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, competitive pricing is one thing. You can't price yourself out of the market necessarily. Yep. If you're not providing anything different than the shop that has all that equipment, then you may find that you can't price the way that you need to make as much profit as you want to, and you might not have as good the margins that this person does with the larger throughput. However, if you treat yourself as a commodity only, you don't try and amend the fact that you only have the same product they do, or you don't try and work on that pricing to make sense of it, then you will eventually get yourself priced out on the other side. As you make yourself a commodity and keep fighting for the lower end jobs, you will lose out because you just won't have the profit to make your business run.
Yeah.
So,
awesome.
As we continue on here, throughout this section of doing the math, we're going to talk about these numbers, and certainly we're going to talk about cost and price. But the first thing to do is just to tell you that price is not pegged to cost. So price is what a customer is willing to pay for your garment, for your product. Cost are the resources that you put into the product. The thing is, these things aren't necessarily tied exactly together. The price and the cost don't have to be in lockstep with each other. And the way I'm going to show that is do a quick story about a product that I actually got involved with once. So here we're looking at a $6 t-shirt and a $60 t-shirt. Truthfully, these are both a nice ladies t-shirt, and neither of these are any different whatsoever. This is the same t-shirt. So why is it in the same city, in the same market, that one was being priced at $60 and one's being priced at $6? Well, truthfully, this is why. It's all the difference between measurable value and perceived value. That $6 shirt, it's a blank shirt, has a standard tag. It's a direct sale. As a decorator, you know a $6 shirt that costs $6 to us as a blank, that's a nice shirt. It's a good quality shirt. There's nothing wrong with this shirt, but we're certainly not getting her to turn it around for $60. However, in the product that we were doing, in the decoration shop I came from, essentially we took that same product, we removed the standard tag, we did a custom tag print, and this custom tag print had branding from a location. This was a boutique. It was a ladies' clothing boutique, a very high-end boutique. That same garment was then packaged in, I mean, I drew this lovely little box here that says the T, but truthfully what it was an interesting looking little package. It looked like a little leather purse. It was embossed, had silver printing on it with the name of the t-shirt, and that same name was inside the neck printed in, and these were sold in a boutique blank at $60. So what we're looking at, same garment, a couple of cents worth necessarily of some packaging. We added some cents worth of printing on the inside of the neck, and a little bit of time spent putting it together, and really the branding of having it sold in the boutique and the experience of buying it from the boutique. So what we've got here is perceived value. What we get hung up on as decorators is measurable value. We want to say, okay, this garment's actually physically better. It's made out of better quality materials. Maybe our decoration looks better than someone else's. Maybe we can even produce a better experience. But really, what this is perceived value. Because the person's buying this from a boutique that they trust, because the name of the boutique is all over the t-shirt and it's someplace that they see as high-end, they're making, truthfully, a bit of an emotional decision. They're deciding that this shirt is better than other shirts because of where it's located, how it's packaged. So the reason I put this here is not necessarily to help you price, but just to remind you that the price is not pegged to the cost you put into it. The price is not pegged directly to the labor you put in. So though we need to know that, and that's the way we calculate our basis, it isn't everything when we're talking about pricing. So what I like to start from is called the minimum to maintain. Too many people, when they talk about pricing, start out with trying to give you a break-even price. The problem is that breaking even usually means that you're covering all of the costs that you're paying out of pocket to make things happen. You're covering all of your overhead, you're covering all your costs for your garment, you're covering whatever you need to get things out the door and to keep your shop open. However, that's not really the minimum that your business needs to maintain operation day to day. Even if you are a solo entrepreneur, running your machine by yourself, doing your own production, your labor is absolutely necessary for your business to survive in that position. So you need to make sure that you, the person doing this labor, or if you have multiple people, those people doing the labor are paid enough to continue to stay and put in the amount of effort they need to in order for the shop to continue and grow. So minimum to maintain certainly contains all those costs that most people talk about, but it also has a reasonable minimum wage for what you do. Because truthfully, even if you think, okay, well, I'm not going to do that all the time, maybe I'll hire somebody eventually, we're going to change that, and I can just make the money off of the profit. Really, you're going to have labor, and if you're talking about growth, the position that you're in now that you eventually want to move out of perhaps, or say you want to stay and do the embroidery, but you want someone else to handle your business work, you want them to do the promotions and the business and the paperwork, somebody's going to have to be paid to do that work if you grow. As you can no longer do the things all by yourself, you will need to have that position filled. That money should already be there and calculated into your production and into your costs. So the minimum to maintain is to pay all the costs and a reasonable wage for all you do. And when we talk about calculating our minimum, we're going to calculate this based on optimal production and growth. The truth of the matter is when you're first starting out, or say you're going through a slow period, you're not always going to be at optimal production. However, the way we're going to calculate this is based on having what we do eventually want to have, which is a full production schedule. So that's how we're going to set up this basis, how we're going to set up the minimum. I'm not going to tell you that there aren't times you fall below what you need to be at, but if we price correctly with the wages included, we're a lot closer to getting to a pricing that is going to sustain us. And the other thing to realize is this is about long-term sustainability. We're going to start pricing to make sure that you have what you need to keep yourself on the job, to keep the shop open, to make sure everything's running, but this is just the basis. The reason I call it the minimum to maintain is because this is where we start. This is the minimum. This is maintenance. This is just to keep the doors open. This is just to keep the machines moving. This is not profit. We start out calculating that minimum so that once we have that basis set, we know where we need to be to make sure we're still here in 6 months. And then we can put on what kind of profit we want to make and what we want to do for our growth. But we just need to make sure that all the time we have in mind long-term sustainability and that we're paying for the people we need as well as the costs we need to cover. So doing the math continues with calculating your costs. You have to start out with things that are measured. So what is measured is what can be maintained, is what can be operated with, is what can be managed. So you do have to measure all your costs. You're going to start with fixed expenses, pretty consistent, standard stuff. The leases on your machines, on your location, subscriptions to any software as a service you need to have. Anytime you have communications has to be paid for, that has to keep up so you can communicate with your customers, keep your websites up, things like that. Insurance, you're going to have insurance on your machinery, you're going to have insurance on your location, and any stable labor costs. If you have people who must be there to operate, those costs should be considered part of your fixed expenses. Make sure you're just accounting for those consistently. Truthfully, why I always say go ahead and put the stable labor in there, even though we're seasonal in some sense, that most shops are going to have high and low periods. It's very hard sometimes to keep people on. If you can start out your calculations for price, assuming you're going to keep somebody on all year, it's really for the best, because truthfully, it's very hard to get skilled labor back when we need them. If you've ever been in a shop long enough, you know what it's like if you go through a narrow period and have to lose an operator and try and bring an operator back. If someone else has that equipment ready to run and they have the money to cover someone, the operator may be gone by the time you need them. So if you can put that stable labor in that calculation, you really should. And then there are the variable expenses. You have supplies, utilities, any temporary labor. You have like seasonal help maybe, especially when we're talking about embroidery, we have that kind of late in the year heavy season. You may need some seasonal help for that, or help for sales, or say you do events or traveling, you may have to have people help out with that. And then I'll also put repairs in there. But the reason there's an asterisk on repairs is, truthfully, I tend to think people should try and put a budget into their fixed expenses for repairs. Also, so that you can eventually fund replacement of equipment. We all know that things are going to break, that you're going to have trouble with paying for new equipment at some point, or you're going to have repairs. I think putting that as an allowance into your fixed expenses is a little bit better than throwing it into your variable when you're doing your final calculation. However, when we're talking about recording all of this, it's okay to think about that as variable expenses and to make sure you're just recording all that during the period when you're getting that initial bead on how much you're spending. Also, miscellaneous costs. Of course, there's just costs that come up, random supplies, things you don't expect. So the thing is, if you've been in business for a while, hopefully you're already doing this. If you're accounting correctly, you should have all of this easy to parse out, something that you can go and pull a report on and make, yourself a couple of reports. If you're just starting out and you haven't been doing this for very long, stop, make sure you're doing this recording, review your costs for a period of time, maybe 1, 2, 3 months, divide that by the number of months and extrapolate it out for a year so you can get your costs for a year and just kind of give yourself an idea. Truthfully, the best thing you could do is have a full year at least of this recording, because we do tend to have some seasonality. It makes sense to have that instead, but the thing to remember about pricing is you shouldn't think of it as fixed forever. You can adjust pricing, and you may need to adjust pricing, especially early on. So first, we're just trying to get a baseline. We want to go ahead and record all these expenses so we know what we're working with. And then we go to our production possibilities. In this, we want to know the labor we can reasonably achieve. What I mean by what we can reasonably achieve is that even if your machine says it can run at 1,500 stitches per minute, there's no chance you're going to run at 1,500 stitches per minute for the entire time. Almost in no case will you be able to do that, and it's not good for the quality of your garment or your eventual design work. It's just not going to look as good running at full tilt. Besides that, when I'm talking about this average stitching speed, which we have as 500 stitches per minute, this accounts for hooping and trimming and any of the other kind of preparation you do. This is what I'm expecting you to actually hit when you're doing the rest of the stuff that goes around producing a garment. So we're going to calculate that at 500 stitches per minute. Also, we're going to assume that we only have about 6 full usable hours for an 8-hour shift. And that's something that actually in most small business, you'll see that this is a number that's thrown around everywhere. It's just a good round number for how many hours of actual full-on dedicated labor you can get out of that shift. Also, we know that we have about 251 working days in a standard year in the US. And what that gives us is 45,180 thousandths of stitches per head per year. And that's how we're going to do our calculation, because we're going to work with thousands of stitches. Generally, people are very used to charging by the thousand, so it's a good unit for us to start with. So when we're trying to get our yearly minimum to maintain, we're just going to do our initial pricing by stitch count. That's one of the ways we can do that. And how we're going to get is that minimum to maintain, which is the calculation of all of those costs that we put together earlier on. We're going to add all those costs up and then divide them by the number of thousands per year. When we get that, we're going to get our minimum to maintain price per 1,000 stitches that we must charge in order to make this work. Now, there's different ways that people can handle this per stitch count. Because truthfully, when you're doing your initial pricing per stitch, you may find that the first kind of small run jobs, the low count jobs, you can lose money if you price them on stitches alone, especially say you have a logo that doesn't have many stitches in it. So if you're looking at stitch count only as a means of pricing, you're going to have a base price per piece. So you need to cover that production labor that remains constant. A hoop is always going to take so much time to be placed in a garment. Whenever you're stabilizing, getting things ready, prepping a machine, whenever you're threading, this stuff is all going to take about the same amount of time, whether you do one piece or 1,000 pieces. So when you're in that low number of runs, when you're doing like sub 12 pieces especially, you're going to have base pricing. So what we usually do when we have a stitch count pricing model is to start off at a certain price, no matter what, even if we have a lower stitch count. So like the shop that I was in, $7, $5, right around that position was where we would be for our first couple of price breaks when we had low count jobs. So we're talking about minimum pricing by the hour. You can also judge things instead of by stitches as a measure of time. This does require you, however, to do some time studies, which we'll talk about. You have to know how much time things are taking for this to work. But if we have 6 usable hours per 8-hour shift, as we said before, and we have our 251 working days in a normal year, that means we have 1,506 work hours in your normal year. In this way, you can take your yearly minimum to maintain and divide that by the estimated work hours per year. You're going to get your minimum price per work hour. And in this case, if you calculate your jobs by the amount of time they take, and you add in the amount of stitches and say in a design, find out how much time that's going to take, you can then price your jobs by that time instead. And if you know what every process takes on a garment, you can use that for your basis instead of stitch count. Some people find that to be more equitable than stitch count, especially because it doesn't have the problem with those low stitch count designs, because you're going to account for your hooping and your processing, your finishing, your shipping. When you're doing that, though, it means you have to do time studies. And this means you literally record an average time for common tasks. And I'm not joking. This means getting out your stopwatch app and going to the production crew, or if you're producing yourself, and timing. How much time does it take for me to hoop garments? How much time does it take me to trim or finish garments, to get things steamed, to get things packaged and folded? And to some degree, you can check how much time in average that it takes to stitch your garments. Because it may find out, especially since we're talking about stitching as its own thing. We're not talking about stitching as I did before, that 500 stitches per minute was accounting for the hooping, was accounting for the trimming and the finishing. If you're not doing that, then you might want to actually time your stitching so that you can find out exactly the kind of averages you're running in a day. And that's going to give you a more accurate estimate than the earlier estimate I gave you. That 500 stitches per minute is a nice general estimate of what you can achieve when you're doing all the different processes together. But with time studies, you can actually know exactly kind of how the stitching is going to go and an average of what you're actually achieving in your shop. So when we're building from those minimums, what we really want to be doing is pushing toward profit. When you're working on profit, you have your minimums established, right? You've found out exactly how much everything costs, or you know how much time it takes to do things, and you've done that either by stitch count, done by time, you've divided this out, you have your minimum to maintain. I now know when I'm looking at a job, you know, if it's got 10,000 stitches, I know exactly what I need to charge for that in order to keep the shop doors open while I run. Now we have to build profit from those minimums. And here are 3 models we're going to talk about briefly that allow you to build that profit in. And these are standard pricing models that you see throughout the industry. And we're going to talk a little bit about pros and cons and how these work. We have garment price and markup and decoration, garment price plus profit adjusted decoration, and flat rate pricing. Garment price plus markup and decoration, pretty standard. The markup and profit is applied to the garment cost. And in this case, say you've got your $5 garment, you're going to do 100% markup. People often call that keystone, where you're just going to double that cost. So your subtotal there, $10 for the garment blank. You're going to add your decoration. This is actually a fairly high margin single head shop that's charging this much for the decoration, say, and that's $12, $22. That's going to be our final price. So we've taken the garment and we've added our markup, what we're expecting to be our profit, onto the garment. For these people, you're going to have to deal with garments that you're supplying to make profit. So the pros for this it's a simple calculation and that it's a pretty normally seen industry standard. People are used to paying that markup. It does, however, mean that in the cons section, you're not going to get profit on customer supplied garments, or you're going to have to adjust your decoration pricing or add some other surcharge in order to do customer supplied garments. For some shops, that's an issue. At the previous shop where I worked at, we just decided to quit accepting customer supplied garments, but for some shops that would actually be anathema. You couldn't run the way that we did. So really, that's the biggest con for that. However, there's also some trouble with cheap garments. Say you've got a very inexpensive garment, somebody chooses like a very low-end jersey polo, marking up that garment really doesn't give you much bread for that profit. You don't have a lot of work that you can actually add to that. If your labor is charged at a flat rate, which it is in this model, you're not going to get much on those inexpensive garments. And on the very expensive garments, say that you have a branded sports shirt, something that's performance wear, it's a different thing to mark a $5 garment up to $10 than it is to mark a $40 garment up to $80. So really, you're going to have less profit on the inexpensive garments, and too much of an increase on expensive garments is going to price you out of the market. So garment price plus markup and decoration can have its problems. The second model is garment price plus profit adjusted decoration. In this model, markup and profit is applied to the decoration itself. The pros are it's consistent. It's easier to estimate profit, and it's entirely tied to labor. So when we're talking about profit adjusted decoration, you're going to be adding the amount of profit you want to make for the year to that minimum to maintain. And the way you handle that is by deciding on the profit you want to make per year. You actually come up with a number for how much that you want to take home, what you're going to take out of that business, and you divide it across either the hours that you're going to work or the stitch count, the way we did earlier for our minimum to maintain, and add that in. And in that case, we then have that tied directly to the decoration and not to the garment. The cons on this, you really should do time studies for this. Really, it makes more sense to work on this from the time aspect. You have to know how much labor you're doing. You have to be pretty well regulated on how you're doing that labor in order to make this make sense. And like I said, you have to predetermine your desired yearly profit. If you're doing this, it doesn't exactly leave a lot of room for you to just make extra profit happen unless you just manage to fit in more work. So this one has that as a con, but it is a more equitable way to price. So the way you mark that up, you'll have your garment cost, say it's $5 again. Then we say we have 20 minutes labor, or say 10,000 stitches, and we're going to calculate that profit. That's $20.67. We add that to our garment costs, $25.67. Pretty close to the other pricing we had previously. And truthfully, the thing that's great about this, if someone does bring in customer supplied garments, I mean, you do have to worry a little bit about what you do with replacing customer supplied garments. You have to have your policies in place to make sure you're remarking on that with your customer. However, you can then price directly on your labor, and you're not going to have to worry about customer supply. You're not going to have to worry as much about garment costs. And when you have the expensive garments, you aren't going to price yourself out based on doubling that garment cost. The next rate we have is a flat rate, and there's actually a couple models we're going to talk about under the flat rate. The first one is the package model. The package model generally has restrictions. Let's say we just have a final price. We're including this one logo on this polo, and it's a specific polo, and it's only one logo, left chest, final price $25, includes everything. It's a specific garment, just a left chest logo, nothing else. And that's often a way that people sell. You see a lot on Instagram sales especially, and they'll even usually do it with a bundle as well, which will be a certain number of garments. The decoration and garment being inclusive, maybe one price per area. The things that are great about this, it's easy to explain, there's no need to quote, and there's no calculations. So if you have a very low technical kind of group of people you're dealing with, people who don't want to have things explained to them and don't have time to worry about that, this is very easy to explain. When you go at it, you don't have to ask a lot about the art. You have everything included, and there's no calculations, means that you can reply with a price immediately. In fact, you don't even have to. Generally, you throw out a banner ad that says this is how much a shirt costs, and everything's done. However, this is much less equitable to your customer and to you. Complicated jobs may be unprofitable. If you have a design that just happens to be a left chest, but the left chest is the max size that you'll accept for a left chest, and or it has really complicated stitching, or it's very full, you may have something where it has tons of color changes, which are very slow, as we know, to slow down your process, or that it's heavy stitching, and so you just have a lot more time on the machine. And what you're really doing is requiring people who have a smaller run, who have something that's a shorter run with less stitching, a simpler design to essentially pay for the people who have the more complicated stuff. And if you have too many complicated jobs in relation to your simple jobs, you may not make enough money overall to even out. The other thing that can happen is restrictions will confuse your customers. You can tell them, okay, $25 left chest on this polo. They'll say, yeah, well, that's great, but I don't like that polo. Yeah, that's great, but I really wanted to have a sleeve design also. And now you're into a custom job. You're back to doing all the quoting, and all the pros of this job are gone. Now you're quoting, now you're calculating. You have to explain things again. So really, it's something that does work in some situations. If you have a really restrictive sale, you can use that. However, overall, I wouldn't call this a pricing model you have for your entire business. Some people find that it works, and in certain markets it will work. But it's not exactly equitable, and it's not great for all custom jobs. The other thing we can have is a flat rate that's a location model. And that's just saying that we're going to price per location, and we're not going to discuss how difficult, how stitch intensive, or anything else about those designs. And in that case, you have your garment cost, you're charging that flat across $5, and say, okay, each location is $10. Left chest logo is $10, sleeve logo is $10, and the final price is $30. Very much like the other flat rate model, it's very simple. So really what we're going to have, the benefits on that again, no quoting, very simple. But the cons, again, it may not be particularly equitable because you're still having that flat rate. Anytime you have a flat rate, it just means that the less complicated jobs, the easier jobs are paying for the people with the more complicated jobs. Same thing happens with garments. You still have to worry about that. That when you're supplying that, you may stop and say, okay, any garment's great, but then you're not making any difference on those garments when you're paying for them. You're not making any profit there. And when you're doing these, you may end up where locations, you'll have to have another set of prices for larger locations or different locations or difficult things that you have to do, or processes. Like maybe you have a different kind of process. Maybe we're on caps and we're doing three-dimensional foam, and these things need to be priced higher and can't be fit under this same restriction. And so you'll have to be explaining those restrictions to customers. Once again, flat rate location model, it works, you can use it, but it does mean you're kind of playing the averages, and it's not necessarily very equitable to your customers, and you may end up a little bit lost depending on what kind of jobs you get in. Once we have our pricing model established, the next thing that's very common is to discount by volume. You want to calculate your discounts either by garment volume and by stitch count. And the reason we discount by volume is we're trying to encourage larger orders. Now, most people think, okay, I'm just trying to get more throughput, and that's why I'm encouraging these larger orders. But really, there's a reason why we can afford to reduce when we have those larger orders. And how can we afford it? It reduces our switching costs. There's no rethreading. You don't reload any designs on the machine. You don't change any of the specs. You just keep running, keep loading machines up, keep hooping garments and throwing them through. So those larger orders are definitely going to be easier to run, and with increased efficiency means that we have actually reduced the costs it takes to put into each of the garment. Same thing, reduce costs from the vendor. If we have a large enough order, we can bargain with our vendors and end up with a lesser cost. As we know, they have the same kind of bulk pricing. And the last thing is the reduced chance for errors. In my years of experience, I've found that if you're going to have an error, a lot of that chance is going to happen during setup, initial sampling, during that first portion of getting that job put together, and if someone's not very careful with the information, or if you have trouble getting information to the places you need it, like say you don't have a job information system where you can store and share information readily or recall it easily, somebody writes something down wrong, you don't hunt down the right information, that's when those errors are going to happen, is during the switchover. That's the most likely chance you're going to run something incorrectly, run the wrong design, run it in the wrong colors. So with a larger order, you don't have that switching. It reduces the chances for errors because once your sample's dialed in, you just keep running and running. So that's how you can actually afford the discounting. The discounting makes sense. Most people think you're just taking a loss, but you're not taking a loss. You're just actually using that increased efficiency, the lower cost from the vendor, to cover that discount by volume. And then we're going to go ahead to digitizing fees. A lot of people have different ways they like to handle digitizing fees, and we're not going to go into fees specifically for doing the digitizing yourself. I'll probably do that in some other blog post or in another fashion, but this is just talking about an embroidery shop. When you're outsourcing digitizing, what do you do with the fees? First method we're going to talk about is just passing on the cost directly. The pros of passing on the cost directly: you can add markup if you like. Not too many shops necessarily do. Some people do. I think that there's a reason why you might not want to, because if you don't add it and you make the equations just saying, I am someone who's arranging this and paying for the file, and you turn over the file to the customer themselves, admittedly, they don't get locked in, which they like. That's a pro for them. But for you, you don't have a barrier for them to leave. So it does have both sides going on. Now, in the shop that I used to be in, we decided that we weren't going to fight when we're talking about the files. We weren't going to fight for files because really the experience, the value we believe that we brought was not just the file, and we were sure that even if we turned the file over, the customers would come back to us because of what we offered. And truthfully, the fight over the file can be so contentious that it can cause a customer who's leaving to be angry and not become a return customer later on if they have trouble with their future shop. So for passing on the costs, the pros are you can add a markup if you like, but if you don't, you can decide to eliminate the fight for the file by turning it over, and then you have less concern from your customer if they're worried about lock-in. And usually you don't have that unless you've got a customer who's had other shops before lock them down by keeping their file hostage. But if you have that customer, this can really soothe their mind when it comes to what they're going to do with the file. The cons are also you lose time in the prep if you don't charge for the file. The prep that you've done in the art and the discussion of this with your digitizer, dealing with possibly samples or reruns, say if you have a problem with it on the machine, you kind of lose that time unless you're calculating your time studies. So it is possible that you're going to lose some time, lose some profit there. Other thing is your customer doesn't have a barrier to leave if they can take the file. There's no reason for them not to go somewhere else. What I'm hoping is that you will have figured out your unique value and provided an experience that makes them not want to do that. The next option you can have is to consider the file a loss leader. And what I mean by that is you don't charge anything for the file and you essentially eat the cost yourself. Especially the shops that digitize for themselves, they will often decide to do this when they have a customer that they think has a promise to be a long-term customer. The pros on this, you retain the ownership, and there's really not as much argument about it because the customer has not paid for any setup fees. The other great thing is you don't have a setup fee fight. Some customers, and not all, will look at an invoice, see any kind of setup fee, digitizing fee, anything else, and start to balk and fight. This eliminates that. Now, it does mean you take the cost on yourself. However, what you do get also is the enticement to return. You give them that free file and say to them, we keep that file on file, ready for you anytime you like, and they can use it freely at your shop. However, you make it clear from moment one that either you're going to keep the file, retain that ownership, or you're going to cause charge a fee that will be caused by any desire to leave. And they want to pull the file. You have to charge a fee to separate that file, set it up for them, and give them that information. The cons are no direct profit on digitizing. If you retain the ownership and you go ahead and do the loss leader, that does mean that you're not going to get to charge for it. And that means that cost, that time spent either with your digitizer yourself, you're going to just lose that. Also, there's some opportunity costs. Whatever time that takes, either for you to set up the file getting done by a digitizer or digitizing yourself, those are opportunities where you could have been doing another job that paid or another piece of work that paid for the business. So that is an opportunity cost, and you should take that into account. The other thing is, initial small orders may be as a loss. You really have to be careful of who you decide to extend this to unless you're doing something else to amortize that cost somewhere else. Unless you're pulling in money that makes sense to charge this, or you have a customer who you know is going to be a reliable reorder, you may lose on a small order or an order where you lose to some other shop. So truthfully, those are the cons. Really, it's hard to weigh out, but honestly, it is a way that works for a lot of people. A lot of people like to use this as an incentive. And what I will always say is, even if you're doing a loss leader setup, when you invoice, go ahead and show that initial price and then deduct it from your invoice. Always show the value you're giving so that your customer is aware of what you give and they know there's value involved. Another way to handle this is to divide by garment. There are some people who just don't like to have that visible setup fee, and if they don't want that to show up, what they'll often do is just spread that cost out over the account of the entire garment cost. Now, it's great for clubs and events, especially when people are going to individually order and they're going to pay per garment with a split up cost for each piece. Then it's great to go ahead and do that. If it's a one-time order, you don't expect that this logo is going to be used again, you can go ahead and just do that spread across and they don't ever see it. Now, the cons are, it skews quote comparisons. If you decide to divide by garment, you may have a customer go to another shop and not really pay attention to the fact that there's a setup fee added into their invoice. And they're going to see, you're not going to have an apples to apples comparison. They're going to see that your garment costs a certain amount more than the other person's garment. If you're running on some slim margins for a small order, it may be that they don't like that. Now, truthfully, you'll have to stop and explain to them where that goes, but it can skew your quote comparisons enough that sometimes people could be upset by it, especially if you're doing something that's large and takes a lot of work. The other thing is it hides the value. Like I said earlier, you want the customer to see the value you're providing. And if you don't show them that value, if you hide it over the garments, they can't see what you've offered. They don't see what you've given them. And eventually that means that they just don't know that value is there and that it should cost money and that it is a cost for you. So really, I don't necessarily love the dividing by garment. It does make for good accounting, but I think you can do that division anyway and show people in an invoice where all those prices come and still divide that by the entire garment count so that you get a finished end. Now, when we're talking about additional fees, some fees should be levied against tasks that add materials and labor. Three-dimensional foam is a huge one because the foam itself costs more. Now you may think, okay, well, it's got about double the density of a normal design and that stitch count's going to cover it. But the finishing costs, running a heat gun over it, trying to poke out little additional pieces of foam, removing the foam, adding the foam, this all takes a lot of time and it really should have that additional labor costs justified. If you're using a time-based study, it'll be a lot easier to handle that. Applique is the same way. Some people will factor it in the same way as they would for a fully filled area, but I don't think it really accounts for the amount of time that it takes to do that. Patch making, same kind of thing. It's a lot of hand labor involved no matter what material you use or what way you do, if it's the plastic film material or doing hand cut or edging yourself, water soluble stabilizer method, which is the way I like to do patch making. It costs a lot, so really you have to make sure you don't just charge for the stitch count and the design that's done. Also, individual packaging and preparation. We're talking about clubs and teams. Though I think it is one of those things you can sell as your unique value proposition, you really should charge and make sure you're being paid adequately for bagging, tagging, labeling, and preparing for, say, like when you have packages that are being picked up by individual parents from a club team, or say we used to do large soccer teams, or say you're doing a uniform program that has to be individually passed out by size per person, make sure you're charging for that individual packaging. Those are things that really do make sense for an additional fee. And rush fees. Now, some people like to take rush fees and apply them to people who I will call nicely pain in the accounting. It has the same 4 letters that start it, but it's not actually what people usually say. And they call that PETA fee. And I don't think that rush fees should be seen as something punitive. When you're charging a rush fee, what you're really doing is justifying overtime on a full schedule or affording an increase in staff or machine capacity. People will see this as a way to just punish people who are constantly asking for a quick turnaround. What you really are doing is assuming that when you're running full tilt, which is what we're aiming to do, that you have a complete and full production schedule, that a rush fee will allow you to keep on staff for overtime to make sure that they can be paid beyond what the initial cost is, because overtime, time and a half, it's going to cost you more. It needs to cost the customer more. The other possibility is that you are going to be increasing staff, hiring other people on, or increasing your capacity to stay within your normal hours. So when you do a rush, there's no problem, especially on these quick turns, very quick turns. I mean, I understand that we've gotten faster in the modern era. The era of Amazon has made us all turn around to 5 to 7 days. But when you have an overnight or 2-day turnaround, it is justified to charge rush fees. You can waive the fee, but like I said earlier, always show the value. Show the value of the fee. Show it on the invoice that you prepare, and then discount that rush fee off when you're giving it to a customer who you feel is worth reducing that rush fee. Or if you have the time in your schedule to do that job, still stop. They don't know how much you have in your pocket, what you need to do, what's on your queue. So make sure you show the fee and then deduct it. Same thing, account for the disruption. Think about how much disruption it costs just in preparing the information and rushing around, changing from the work that you were going to do to this new work. That disruption is part of what they're paying for. So there's no problem charging that rush fee, and you need to charge it because part of what's happening isn't just what's going on in production, but it's what's going on in sales and preparation. So account for the disruption. And also remember to account for your opportunity costs. If you decide to do this quick turnaround, you're likely having to drop everything and work on this job immediately. It means that you may have stopped communicating with another customer. You may have turned around and had to order something you wouldn't have before. You may have additional shipping costs. And if you're not calculating for all those costs and for the opportunity costs for the work you could have been doing while you turn around to do the rush, you're going to end up losing out. So rush fees are justified. You justify overtime, and they allow you to plan also, if this continually happens, to either increase staff or capacity or that you'll know that you can always charge that if you have a customer who's consistently rushing. So the last thing I'm going to talk about this is price versus value. Now, when we're talking about price, all the things we've had up until this point were all based on measurable values. The amount of labor you put in, the amount of materials you used, what it took for you to change your schedule, how much you can run in a given day. Those are things that are measurable, but there's also perceived value. And you have to think, what is your unique value proposition? What is the thing that your shop can do and will do that other shops around you either can't or won't, or doesn't do as well as you do? People will pay more and value you more if you can do the following. If you can make their lives easier. If ordering, pickup, and communication is easier and more pleasant, you will be more valued. If you can offer a product or a decoration that others can't or won't. If you're the only person within a tri-state area that does quick run patches or chenille work or sublimation additional to your embroidery to do some multimedia work, if you do something that other people can't or won't, or if you make things easier, say you're a one-stop shop and you have a full complement of different decoration styles in-house, and you can do things at a quick turnaround. Maybe you do those rushes all the time and you accept them and you plan for them. That is something that others can't or won't do, and it's something that makes their lives easier. Also, if you maintain a high standard for quality, if you always take care to make sure you've got the best digitizing, your embroidery is well done, your materials are properly used, you have a good hand on your garments, you don't just throw backing at a problem to make something stable. If you always take care and have a high standard for quality, if you offer garments that are well done and you do nice finishing, that high standard for quality can also make you have a higher value proposition. And in the end, you can also just provide an enjoyable experience. If you are, say, a brick and mortar and people are coming into your shop and you have the best customer-facing space, you have a comfortable showroom, a place people can sit down, friendly salespeople who are not only friendly, but willing to help and consult with people and help them to make the decisions they need to make to get things done and to reduce the amount of labor it takes for them to get an order put through, that enjoyable experience also is a unique value proposition. And it's something I've always said, especially customer-facing spaces, it's surprising, both when you're talking about websites and making things easier to order. It's something that here at Deco Network we're very passionate about. If your website is professional looking and works well and provides functionality that makes it easier to order and pay and to approve, that makes you easier to work with, that's going to increase your value. If you have a showroom, the brick and mortar folks, people are coming in to view things and you have a nice showroom that's kept up, even if it's a small space, if the space is clean, if you have samples that people can view, if you have catalogs at the ready, and if you provide them an enjoyable experience, they're going to want to work with you again because truthfully, people are taking time out of their day to do this. And you can imagine yourself as a customer and how much difference it makes when the ambiance of a restaurant is a certain way, or when you have the proper service, when you don't have to worry about how things are going to go because you know you're in good hands. So providing an enjoyable experience is another way to provide a unique value proposition. So when we're talking about this, the last thing I want to leave you with on price versus value is that price shoppers are fickle and follow deals. If all you do is survey the prices around you and price below them, you are going to have fickle price shoppers. These folks will go with the next person who can provide the next dirt cheap decoration, and you won't be able to keep them. So you have to compete on the value you offer, not just your price. Are there people who have models that work on pricing low? They do, but they have to work on efficiency, and they really have to be careful with the way that they do their time studies and how much all those costs are done and exactly what they're spending on everything. It means that they really have to play a very tight numbers game, and their margins are low. If you want to have a higher margin and you want to have more value with less labor, you need to compete on that value. You have to have a unique proposition because just pricing on that base price just on costs means that you're just going to have to keep that margin lower, and all you can do is increase efficiencies to get you to a place where there's more profit. So for most shops, the better value for you is to compete on the unique value proposition, to find what's unique about your shop and to be you. So in the end, this is what I want to leave you with. You do want to know your costs. You want to understand the math. But one of the most important things you can do is to be you. And what that means is your shop is unique. The complement of people who you have, even if it's just you, there's something you do that is different than the others. Be you. Find that thing that you do that makes you good to work with, that makes your shop different, that makes your product different, and to be that and advertise that. Because once you know the cost and you understand the math, you'll be able to price in a way that's going to allow you to stay open. But if you want to move, you want to grow, you want to stick in people's minds, and you want to be someone that they want to work with, you need to be yourself and be good to work with. So know your costs, understand the math, and in the end, one of the most important things you can do is to be you.